a drive, way back, it might be, it could be, it is. Holy cow, welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans, welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Thank you so much to our awesome sponsors, Wrigleyville Sports, the best sports store in Wrigleyville, and Yaggy Road Roasting Company, based in Valpo, Indiana, serving cups of coffee just as special as the moments you drink them in.
Hello, welcome to Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Brickheads! Welcome to a very special edition of Bricks Behind the Ivy, the podcast built brick by brick for Cub fans by Cub fans. I'm your host, Jeff CandidCubs Ragauskis, lifelong Cubs diehard with blue blood in my veins and an old style usually in my hand. Today, we're stepping out of the Ivy and we're doing something a little bit special. As you can notice if you're watching on YouTube, that Pat Erickson isn't here, but I do have one of our longest standing guests. I believe this is your third appearance, Mr. Jake McKibbin of the Brewer blogs, coming to talk about the team up north, as we so lovely call Wrigley North at Miller Park. Jake, how are you doing today?
Oh, thanks for that slide dig there, Jeff. I'm doing good. It's nice to see baseball season just sort of heating up, and we're getting down to the point where each of the games sort of start to matter, and you're checking in how everybody does. So, you know, when you're on top of the perch and you get to just watch everyone below you, it's just a really nice feeling, Jeff, you know?
Agreed, yeah, and I think this is the stretch drive. I always talk about on the show that, like, baseball's a marathon, not a sprint. So, like, now that, you know, you're kind of in a position to do the last leg, you know, of the 26.2 miles or whatever, we've got maybe like 10 miles left, and you're trying to really load up and get through that runner's wall to really see if you've got the legs to make some noise once you get to the tournament in October, which is, you know, the ultimate goal of every Major League Baseball, should be the ultimate goal of every Major League Baseball franchise at this time of year. But before we get going, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast app if you're listening to the audio. Helps more Brickheads find the show. And if you haven't, make sure you're over on YouTube watching the video of this podcast on the Bleacher Bunch Network, your one-stop shop for all things Cubs. We've got several podcasts that are featured on the Bleacher Bunch Network: Cubs PS Plus with Mike Waller, Sun Ranto with the great Danny Rocket, Cup of Cubby Blue with Bleed Cubby Blues, Sarah Sanchez, the Bleacher Bunch Show, which is a live show on Thursday nights that features just a smattering of all of us, and the monthly podcast Baseball Rabbit Hole with Michael Cotton. So make sure you are subscribing there today. So, Jake, I brought you on today. I've had you on a few times to talk about the Brewers. You write for Brewer Fanatic. You've got some really good analytical pieces over there. So you have a really good grasp of, you know, this team and, you know, what they're doing. Obviously, they just went on an extremely long winning streak and are now, as of this recording, which is, you know, Friday, July 25th, are in first place in the Central Division. And if you see Cubs Twitter at all, like, there's been like a hardcore meltdown as people feel like this is deja vu all over again. And, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the Cubs have, you know, some needed things they need to address before pencils down at 5 o'clock Central on July 31st, and have done an amicable job of surviving. But I also can, you know, appreciate that the Brewers have had some health, have had some reinforcements come up in the Miz and Brandon Woodruff have really solidified that rotation, making them a threat. So, you know, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on the 2025 Milwaukee Brewers?
Oh, you buttered me up real nice there, Jeff.
I did the dig at the beginning of the episode. I had to come back. I didn't want you to feel bad.
I mean, at this point, it feels a bit like the Brewers have been a season in two parts, and even statistically, it really seems to show that. So when you look at maybe the opening day roster, we have people like Connor Thomas and Nelson Rodriguez. And the first 4 games of the year, I think we had a run differential of probably in the minus 20s, mid that range, and we conceded over 40 runs. Now, that immediately sent off warning flags for a team that hadn't lost 4 games in a row all year. I think it happened twice in the first month. So there were some warning signs there for a team that prided itself very much on not taking at bats off. It's about grinding and battling for every pitch. So when that mentality wasn't there was concern. There were worries maybe Willie Adames was a big part of setting that last year. Pat Murphy, I think, had 2 behind closed doors meetings within a week of each other. Players were getting sat down for errors they maybe wouldn't usually make, especially the rookies. It didn't look the cohesive unit, which had allowed them to succeed so well last year. And then there seemed to be a point, and I think it was turned around a little bit by Christian Yelich, added a little bit of spice to proceedings. So he went on one of his hot streaks in and around sort of May 22nd, and that's when the season just turned around. So there's been a little over 50 games since then, and the Brewers have won 36 of them. Yelich went on an absolute tear. It just seemed like he was barreling the ball a little bit like 2019 Yelich, and that slowed down a little bit of late, but he sort of started the ball rolling a little bit. And then we started to see some really positive signs from Freddie Peralta. Chad Patrick was a rookie coming up and performing. Caleb Durbin and Joey Ortiz. Durbin's a rookie that we acquired from the Yankees in the Devin Williams trade over the offseason. Started off slow, doesn't hit the ball hard, but he elevates well to the pull side. But small guy, questions over his defense, and he didn't start the season all that great. Joey Ortiz could do nothing but pop the ball up to first base for probably the first month and a half, which was fun to watch. So you have black holes all over the lineup. But from that date, Caleb Durbin has had a 138 WRC plus. He's been 38% above league average, which, to put in context, is pretty much the same as Pico Armstrong has performed in that period. Joey Ortiz has been above average, and they basically cancelled out those black holes in the lineup. Still struggling for power. That's not a big part of the game. Jackson Churio hasn't quite gotten hot. William Contreras is struggling. But then that rotation hit. And the Brewers the whole staff, whether it's the bullpen, I know you mentioned it's maybe not as locked down as it used to be, but Trevor McGill has been lights out at the back of the pen. Abner Uribe is some of the filthiest stuff you'll see. Jared Koenig just throws 3 different fastballs right over the heart of the plate, and it just seems lefties cannot square that up. Grant Anderson has the filthiest four-seamer in all of baseball this year in terms of whiff rate. Aaron Ashby and DL Hall have been incredible. So really up and down that bullpen, you have a variety of guys for a variety of different roles and looks that have just performed brilliantly. But you also have Woodruff coming back off the IL. And don't get me wrong, this is not the Brandon Woodruff of old or anything. Well, I wouldn't say anything close, but the fastball is maybe topping out at 95 and sitting 93. It's not that 97, 98 mile an hour heater that just blows past you, but he competes in the same way. And he is absolutely dotting his pitches in and around that strike zone, which is it's really quite nice to see. Quinn Priester, the Brewers have worked their magic with. For a guy who walked a lot of hitters and didn't strike anyone out, now strikes people out at an acceptable rate, doesn't walk many, and the ball, he just keeps it in the park, he keeps it on the ground, and he's just been generating a ton of swing and miss. He struck out Ohtani, Freeman, and Betts to start the game against the Dodgers the other day, which was never something big. Like, you and I have probably both seen Quinn Priester play for the Pirates. That is not what you would expect from that.
No, he's been really good for the Brewers, and I am shocked.
Completely. I mean, so are we. Most of the Brewers sort of sphere were questioning that trade, because specifically for the Brewers organization, giving up the 33rd pick in the draft is quite a big deal when that's where a lot of your talent comes from, is that draft class and spreading the money around. So they clearly saw something and they went after it, and it's really paying dividends. Then you've got Mizorowski, who just, again, there was a bit of strength. He looked stronger in spring training. The results weren't quite there. But for him to have gone in the space of a month and a half from a guy who couldn't find the strike zone to just pummeling it, and even he's not a controlled pitcher, but if we look at Fangraphs, who give you pitching plus grades where 100 is average, he's sitting at 102. He also has the best stuff of any starter in the big leagues. and it's not close. So when you pair those two together, you've got a really formidable weapon there. So I think when you look at the fact that, as you mentioned before we came on, that sometimes with the Cubs you find that some of the starters, it feels like a bullpen day. It feels like a day off. When you go through the Brewers rotation and you have Quintana's probably the weak link, and Nestor Cortez is going to come back soon, and then you have Quinn Priester, Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta, and Jacob Misiorowski. That is an incredible setup. And then you go to that bullpen later. It's the reason they've been successful again for me is that rotation, and it means that you can scrap by and you can put pressure on teams, and even the losses are tight losses. There's no blowouts, and I think that's been a real sort of strength of this team over the last 2.5 months now. Which, I mean, honestly, from where they were is a really incredible turnaround.
Yeah, I think, looking at the marker that you put on, and this will be our Yaggy Road roasting nerd alert of the day.
Nerd alert!
So just looking at the statistics like that from May 22nd, on a pitching side, Milwaukee's had a 7.1 WAR with a 9.26 K per 9, which is one of the best in baseball in that period, third in baseball behind the Braves and the Astros. And yeah, their home run to fly ball rate's about 10.9. If you look at the Cubs pitching, it's in that same marker, so May 22nd. They are 8th worst in WAR at 3.7, and they lost Justin Steele. There's been a large period of that in which Shodi Minaga wasn't pitching, and then there's a large frame of that as well now with Jameson Taillon out. So really, it's a really interesting inflection point to look at. And, offensively, same thing. The Cubs have, in aggregate, by the data, are the second best offense with weighted runs created plus in baseball. But looking at, from the point of May 22nd that you mentioned where the Brewers season turned around, the Cubs are at 112 weighted runs created plus on offense, and the Brewers are at 113. So even with all the star power and all the big seasons we've seen from the Cubs, this is a team, the Brewers and the Cubs have offensively been, match for match by the metrics since that point, where the Cubs pitching has really fallen off and the Brewers have really taken off and solidified. So it makes, the conversation make way more sense when you look at it in the smaller pocket. And that's, something that we kind of strive to do here at Bricks Behind the Ivy is that, this didn't happen overnight. The Brewers have gotten healthy. Misiorowski finding the strike zone has been a huge development, because I remember when we talked early this season, he was really struggling with walks in the minors, and it had become from, I thought this kid was going to be a big part of this year for the Brewers, to he might not make the major league club and maybe it'll be the bullpen. And now he's, obviously gotten to shine in the All-Star game and, turning heads and what he can do out there. It's the story in that from that point, which I think will help Cub fans understand, is the Brewers have been playing extremely good ball, and it's around the pitching, where that just continues to really hammer the point that the Cubs need to address the pitching at this deadline and get starters that not necessarily I'm not saying they have to be world beaters, but when Ben Brown has been one of the major league worst starters production wise. And then you've had to replace Jameson Taillon with, Colin Ray. Cade Horton has been, a really nice step up, but we've been using Colin Ray in a bullpen day for 2 games in a lot of series, and that's not really setting yourself up for success. So the Cubs need to really extend that depth.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting way to sort of look at things in a way, because if you look at the 2 rosters, you can see the very clear upgrades are needed in terms of both rosters do some things really well. They both defend incredibly well. Both of them, the Brewers' pitching staff is probably one of the best, if not the best in baseball at this point. Depending on if you said we're going to go into a playoff, there's your 3 starters, there's your bullpen, let's go. It would probably be one of the most feared in baseball. And you could say the exact same for the Cubs lineup, because who wants to turn around and face Kyle Tucker, Pete Crow Armstrong, Michael Bush, Seiya Suzuki in a row? That that is difficult. So you turn around and you say, well, actually, the Cubs starters, and probably maybe from my point of view, from watching some of the games recently, I know the bullpen had quite a good stretch, but it does seem like there's going to come a point where there's a regression to the mean, maybe for the likes of a Drew Pomeranz.
Yeah, we've already seen the cut right on his fastball, which has given him a lot of success, has flattened. Credit to Brian Smith over at Cubs Prospectus for pointing that out. Like his fastball's gotten flat. It's not deceptive. It's getting hit real hard, and yeah, he just could not have maintained what he was doing. It's been a great story, but yeah, it's not going to keep happening.
Of course. And even the likes of Kate Horton, who I actually watched his last start, and you can see the off speed, the breakers, brilliant pitches, but the fastball is hittable. So if you turned around and said that the Cubs got, a Seth Lugo to fill in there and a premier, say a David Bednar to come in and say, we've not just got one closer in the form of Daniel Palencia, who's been brilliant this year, but we now have like a 1-2 punch at the back of the pen, and maybe even another arm that you're really comfortable in that seventh inning role, or as like a fireman to just come and put things out. I think you'd see a real step up in terms of like the consistency game to game. Like you could then see the Cubs go on that real run that you've seen from the Brewers recently, who also may be turning around and saying, well, if we throw our chips in with an AU Suarez, and all of a sudden that pressure on the base pass isn't just relieved by, oh, there's an error, or this single is squeaked through, or we've got to double down the line to, boom, ball's gone. Big difference. So I would say, looking at it from an external perspective, both rosters are in a state where there's a very clear upgrade needed for both, but also the strengths of both rosters are so impressive that there's a reason they're basically the two best teams, and not just the NL, but in all of baseball really right now. And it gives off a little bit of the vibes almost of, was it 2021 where we saw the Dodgers and the Giants go for those, I'm not saying we're going to end up with 107, 108 win seasons here, but that sort of battle, which was just brilliant to follow all season. And as a fan and a writer, and I'm sure as a fan yourself, although it's painstaking to watch your closest rivals push you, and it's nice to have a nice easy run, it's also pretty exhilarating to be part of a sport where every game matters. No,
yeah, and I always feel like in today's game, there's no like statistic that proves this, but I feel like there's always kind of that weird moment when the team that kind of coasts, kind of struggles in the postseason behind that second gear, where if you're constantly playing games that have meaning, like you're ready for that moment. And I feel that's something that is going to be an advantage on the stretch, instead of the Cubs just kind of walking away with this thing, which like it felt early that was something that could happen. But yeah, I think the Cubs pitching has really let themselves in, has let the Brewers come back into this, and really just some really great play from the team up north. And it's really like it's the blueprint of the last, like, since like 2018, the Brewers teams of really strong defense. They shifted a little bit probably around 2022 to really having some speed around the field as well, creating some chaos. Obviously, last year they led baseball in batting average and balls in play, or like base hits on infield hits, just because they were so fast with guys like Bryce Trang and Jackson Chourio, and they still pushed that pressure. And I feel like the Cubs have kind of adopted a little bit of that type of mentality, that roster construction, under Craig Counsell year 2. Like I feel like the teams are very similar, and the Cubs I think are overperforming just because of his ability to kind of adjust the bullpen on the fly. Like, and the Brewers are still kind of running on that philosophy, that organizational philosophy that they've used. So I do want to pivot to. So obviously the trade deadline's coming up. The Cubs have been linked to just a wide variety of names. A lot of there seems to be a wide net cast. There's rumors of the Cubs being extremely aggressive in improving this group, knowing what they have. the Brewers, I have not seen their names as, as widespread as the Cubs, but, they're not as, as sought after or as covered as a team, unfortunately, as the Cubs would be. So, from your perspective, do you see, an avenue for the Brewers to address this team at the deadline, and what are the things you think they'd be looking to do?
Yes, I definitely do. Now, it's an interesting one because when the Brewers, the front office works, they do it very quietly. Nobody really seems to know quite what's happening until bang, it's there. One of my learned colleagues at Brewer Fanatic noticed Ken Rosenthal going off about how the Brewers never do this and never do that, and they're not going to be in on Suarez, they're not going to be in here. And with all due respect, some of the national media coverage in general doesn't seem all that accurate response with the Brewers. As I would say, they're probably going to have a very good analytical model basically sitting in the background, analysing the value of these players, what value they think they can get from them, what they're giving up. But they are ideally suited, I believe, to match up with the Diamondbacks, who are looking for long-term controllable pitching. Now, for someone like Suarez, who you're a rental, you're getting 2 months of it, but you're getting 2 months of, I think he's the 6th best hitter in baseball over the last year of games. There's going to be an expense there, but the Brewers have almost a full MLB caliber rotation sitting in AAA right now with Nestor Cortez, Logan Henderson, Chad Patrick. They have Carlos Rodriguez just back, who's made starts from this year and done capably. And I'm missing another name there. But in terms of that, they have the weapons sitting there to use. Tobias Myers, who made starts in the postseason last year. So they have the trade chips there. But if you ask me, if Suarez turns into a complete overpay, I don't think they'll pick him up. And I can actually see a better fit maybe being Orion O'Hearn, because first off, he's a brilliant defensive first baseman, something the Brewers actually don't have at the moment, and they valued in the past with the likes of Carlos Santana. He's a left-handed power bat who replaced Jake Bauers on the roster, who really has struggled, bar a hot start. And in general, first base hasn't been great since, again, even that May 22nd date. I think Rhys Hoskins is one of the worst hitters on the team. Now, Andrew Vaughn has had a resurgence, but you'd rather him be a weak side of the platoon and O'Hearn take the bulk of the at-bats in that situation anyway, given he has that solid floor of I don't strike out, he takes his walks, and then he can run into a ball, and when he gets hot, he can get hot for a month and just carry an offense, which is really what you want in October. So I would say Ryan O'Hearn's probably a very good fit. The other one they might be looking for, because they always do it, is an upgrade in and around the bullpen. Currently they have 3 long relievers sitting there, and Tobias Myers was up. He pitched on Wednesday for the first time since being called up on July 3rd. So to say that spot wasn't being used, I would think they're looking for maybe another high leverage reliever that they can filter in and out to give the likes of Uribe and Koenig, who have been really overworked in the first half, a little bit of a break. So I would say those are probably the 2 areas they're going to try and address. The outsider might be a power bat in the outfield, Adelisco Garcia, someone like that, but I think that's more of an outside shot, and the left-handed first base bat, I think, might fit really nicely, particularly given Suarez's sort of defensive struggles, although that bat would be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because I think kind of what you said about national commentary, a lot of the discussion has been, the Cubs have all these pieces, that do the deals that they want. They've got top 100 prospects that, are ready to go. And, I don't know how often Cub fans are, scurrying through top 100 rankings, but the most recent one on MLB.com has, they have 6 top 100 prospects. So most of them more highly rated than some of the ones on the Cubs. Sitting there for them to be able to make a major move. It's not usually in, the Brewers' MO, the mortgage their future because of how they manage their finances, but they do have the pieces to really be involved in this trade deadline. And like you said, like they don't get the national coverage even when they're good. that like when they do something, it does seem to come out of nowhere because of tight-lippedness and maybe a lack of like a true like reporter staying on top of the minutia. Where like yeah, like people are sniffing around the Cubs, and it's in the best interest of a lot of pundits to have rumors about the Cubs out there that try to drive up prices in general. So like it's the classic like when the Cubs have scaled back financially on free agents, like not having the Cubs name involved could like lower the bidding of certain free agents because there's not this big market club that could blow you out of the water. So that's like it really is a different perspective, and it's one that I think Cub fans need to take. But yeah, like there's got Jefferson Caro, the catcher, and Logan Henderson, two guys that are at AAA that are 66th and 81st respectively in the top 100. And, Jacob Ragauskis is going to graduate off this list. So they truly have five, similar to the Cubs. And yeah, I think maybe the attractiveness to the Cubs is that, three of their top 100 prospects are, sitting at AAA, like, and are positionally blocked at the moment. So like maybe they're a little more major league ready. But yeah, we'll see what ends up happening.
And just a question, though, Jeff, like, do you find it frustrating, even as a Cubs fan, that people talk about trading these top 100 prospects? So some will say, we'll give up Owen Cassie for 2 months of Dylan Cease, and you hear these writers talk about things like that, and you're like, that's not how it works. If you trade prospects at the top level, you want 2.5 years of control. Or something.
There was a good article recently talking about the number of top 100 prospects traded at the deadline, like each year since like 2016, and in the last like 3 years combined, there's only like 5 total, and like it's so rare that it happens now because of how teams like hoard these prospects. And there is, I would say, like a smaller group of teams that are truly like using their financial might and using prospects to go all in. Like, AJ Preller is a madman, and, the Dodgers are trying to maximize their window with Shohei Ohtani. So maybe those are the ones where the top 100 prospects are moving the most. But besides that, everybody else is holding on to those chips, to make sure that their organization doesn't go through like some sort of cliff, like the 2021 post Cubs when that whole core left, and they kind of had to do a soft rebuild or reset to see if they can try to build the sustainable winner. But yeah, I think I like tweet stuff from time to time, and I shared an article yesterday where Matt Trueblood, who we both know, wrote an article saying that there's the Dylan Cease deal, that the Padres are looking for someone for their outfield. He said so a Dylan Cease deal would have to be around the idea of like moving them like say a Suzuki. That's the type of thing they're looking for. And I shared this article and just got blasted on Twitter. They're like, who's this idiot writing this? And I'm like, no, this is like, he is informed. And he's saying that is the asking price. Like, he's not saying they're going to go get Dylan Cease and trade to Suzuki. That's what he's saying is going to take, because the Padres are trying to thread the needle of competing and moving expiring contracts. So like, I think that it's hard as an average fan. We've all been educated to hug prospects, and then like I also don't believe that like you should do that, because none of these, like, until these guys have major league at bats, they're all lotto tickets. So like if you can help your big league club by moving some guy you don't know, then like stomach the idea this guy could be a superstar on some other team. But like the likelihood of that happening because of how hard this game is so low that you might as well try to win the World Series, because that's the thing that everybody wants.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, even looking back, the cycle of even the Milwaukee Brewers, where they sent 4 of their top prospects to Miami for Christian Yelich, who then arrived, and for, I think average Christian Yelich for the first 6 months, and then for the next year and a half turned into the greatest player in baseball. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, that's worth it. But none of those trade prospects amounted to anything. So as long as the organization has a strong grasp of their own talent and an understanding of it, and then can take advantage of maybe organizations that don't, Rockies, then maybe those are entirely okay to trade. And I think that's where the difference in our two markets come from, where Milwaukee can't afford to go out and spend $30 million a year for 3 years of an Alex Bregman or for 5 years of an Alex Bregman. It's just not possible. And those contracts are set up to then have 2.5 years of great production, a year of average production, and declining production. Okay, and Milwaukee can't afford that. So they are probably more prospect aware or more prospect hugging than most, whereas there is no reason why the Chicago Cubs should have blocked prospects sitting at AAA that they aren't using to leverage for 2.5 years of control of a really strong starter, whether that be like an Edward Cabrera. Like, they have the tools to do it, and they can replace those prospects quite easily on the open market.
Exactly. And, just, for Cub fans who, aren't as, well versed, that Yelich deal, they sent Lewis Brinson, Isan Diaz, Monte Harrison, and Jordan Yamamoto. Every one of these guys is in the minors currently. Not one of them is a Major League Baseball player. All of the
one
hitters,
of them is actually playing college football. Monte Harrison, I believe, is now going back to college to start a football career. It's that bad.
I was gonna say he was, according to this, he was at the Brewers AAA affiliate until 2023. So yeah, like in his Major League batting stats, like he has 12 career hits. Luis Brinson, probably the most at bats of anyone, 212 career hits, has been out of baseball since 2022. Jordan Yamamoto has been out of baseball since this ad got in the way. Oh gosh, 2022. Like, all these guys are gone, and you got Christian Yelich. Like, that's why I will argue till the day I die. Like, do not hug prospects. Like, Lewis Brinson was at times, if I recall, like compared to like, oh, he's gonna field like Trout, and like if the hitting gets there, he was a number 13 prospect in all of baseball, and the guy never panned out. Like, that just, there are no guarantees. It's a really freaking hard game. So
Exactly.
well, Jake, thank you so much for hopping on. Let's give you just a quick moment to kind of plug what you've got going on, Brewer Fanatic, and where Cub fans can kind of find your writing, to get, I guess, a more even keel look at, what the Brewers are doing in respect to, like, what the Cubs are doing.
Yeah, so I am at the Brewer Blog over on Twitter, and Jake McKibbin on Blue Sky, if you use that. I write for Brewer Fanatic. My sort of specialty would be around the sort of the analytics. I love deep diving into things. It's usually not sort of the more impassioned articles, but I do really love dissecting sort of moments and qualities within players. So yeah, look, if you feel like checking something a little bit different out, I'm sure there'll be lots of that content coming out in the preview to next week's pretty blockbuster series. So if you feel like popping on over and checking me out, please go on ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I recommend everybody do it. Jake's a great writer, really good analytical view, which is, similar to like the type of things I really enjoy looking into. So go check that out. Get more educated on our enemies, I guess, as we, go into the next phase of this trade deadline change and the rest of this season. Until next week, thank you everybody for joining us. And as always, because I'm sorry, Jake, this is a Cubs show, go Cubs.